With the soon-to-be released Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, director J.J. Abrams has said his goal is not only to give a satisfying conclusion to Disney's sequel trilogy, but to the whole 9-episode Skywalker saga. The most obvious way we know he's doing this is with the return of Palpatine through means not yet revealed, but will that alone be enough to make all 9 films into a cohesive whole? Or are there other plot elements that can be brought in even at this late stage and offer a satisfying conclusion to the story which began 42 years ago? I think I have a way. Rey being a clone could be the central element that solves the whole series and ties together all 3 trilogies. Now this by itself isn't my own theory, and I first heard it from the excellent YouTube channel Star Wars Theory, but inspired by that I think I have some additions and embellishments that would really give Star Wars the conclusion it deserves. His main evidence for Rey being a clone is the dark side vision that Rey has in The Last Jedi, where she sees multiple mirrored reflections of herself that are all slightly out of step when she moves, and shown in particular when she clicks. At the time we may have thought it was all just artsy visuals without any greater meaning, as much of that film kind of was. The frustration of course exacerbated when she was going to supposedly see her parents, but it turns out to be her reflection again. This though could make a lot more sense if it turns out Rey is actually a clone, and so her parent would really be another version of herself. So what could Rey being a clone mean for the wider galaxy? Well, being as we know he's back, imagine firstly that the cloning plan was by Palpatine. He of course has form on this, the clone army having been part of his original scheme to gain absolute power. However, he's back himself, whether it's as a Force apparition or in a clone body of his own, or if he somehow survived his apparent death in Return of the Jedi. Which, as an aside, Leia's survival in the vacuum of space in The Last Jedi makes look less absurd within the new confines of the sequels. However, he's back, Palpatine nevertheless left the galactic stage between episodes 6 and 9. Now imagine if as a contingency for him to one day be able to return to power, he had created many exceptionally force sensitive clones waiting for the signal Order 66 style to rise up and retake the galaxy for him. They would be completely unaware of their real nature and purpose until that point, much as how the Clone Wars clones fought side by side with the Jedi with much camaraderie until the signal was given for Order 66. These new clones created by Palpatine would therefore be perfect sleeper agents. It's implied, and I think was at one point going to be made explicit in Revenge of the Sith, that Palpatine himself was responsible for the midichlorians making Shmi pregnant with Anakin. As such, his mastery over midichlorians could perhaps mean he may have the power to make these clones themselves inherently powerful in the Force, just as we see that Rey is. Being a designed person, this could explain her extreme adaptability, such as being able to fly the Millennium Falcon brilliantly and fix it, or defeat Kylo Ren when she first held a lightsaber. These are just the kind of instant intuitive skills that Palpatine would want in his new clones for reconquering the galaxy. Piloting skill, after all, isn't a natural Force ability. Anakin was a brilliant pilot, seemingly from the near off, though unlike Rey's situation, the Phantom Menace didn't go so far as to claim the Boon to Eve race was his first time in a pod racer. Piloting was, though, a peculiar skill to Anakin. Obi-Wan, by contrast, is always uncomfortable with piloting, so we can't just invoke Rey's Force ability alone to excuse her instant talent. As unlikely as it is, Anakin did learn to pilot on Tatooine, as his son later would, and his job in Watto's shop made him good at fixing things, not merely his ability in the Force. Rey's mind being designed, though, would explain her quickly acquiring high talent at so many skills, building off those that she did acquire on Jakku, a little bit like the drug in Limitless. It would also explain the impulse that Rey has in The Force Awakens to return to Jakku and wait for her parents. It's built into these clones that they should remain in the one location so they're optimally spread when they're activated. It would also explain the brief shot of a seemingly Sith Rey that we see at the end of one of the Rise of Skywalker trailers. It wouldn't be the Rey we know, it would be another of Palpatine's clones, now activated and aware. Now here's where I add another thing to make the theory more complete. Supreme Leader Snoke really is Darth Plagueis. Now this was a favourite fan speculation before The Last Jedi, but after he was killed off with no explanation, as though Rian Johnson was categorically telling us that our Snoke theory sucks, people have become less interested in the idea. There are two major pieces of evidence that were cited to support it. The first is that the deep ambient music John Williams played during Snoke's appearances in The Force Awakens was similar to the ambient music when Palpatine tells the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise in Episode 3. The second was Daisy Ridley seeming to almost slip up during a Star Wars panel before The Force Awakens came out and identifying Plagueis with Snoke. In the clip you can see she starts saying an S sound before Abrams interrupts her. An additional supporting evidence I like to add is, who else could Snoke really be? Some fans would say it doesn't matter and that with the sequels forging a new path, placing Snoke back into Star Wars history is the wrong approach. I personally utterly reject this, as these films, whatever you think of them, are meant to be a continuation from the previous 6 and not a reboot. And with JJ Abrams saying he sees Episode 9 as a conclusion to the entire saga and him bringing back Palpatine, my view on what the sequel's relationship should ideally be to the original film seems to be winning out. With a detailed and established mythology just with the first 6 episodes, even ignoring the old expanded universe, for an old and hugely powerful dark side user like Snoke to exist with no previous place in Star Wars history would feel wrong, particularly if making a cohesive saga is the aim. Also in this theory, the apprentice who kills Plagueis in the story told to Anakin would indeed actually be Palpatine himself. Now some theorise that Palpatine is actually an unreliable narrator, but this would mean that everything that we know about Plagueis could be false. This doesn't contradict the Disney canon, but Plagueis was established as real and Sidious's master in the old expanded universe, so retconning one of the most popular scenes in the prequels into a red herring would do little but annoy those of us who care enough. When Palpatine reveals to Anakin that he is the Sith Lord, he also mentions that his mentor told him everything about the Force, including the dark side, solidifying his own link to the Plagueis story. What's more, as it forms part of Palpatine trying to deepen the division between Anakin and the Jedi, when he says that it's not a story the Jedi would tell you, to be sure of this, it makes sense that the tragedy of Darth Plagueis isn't really a legend at all. Otherwise, there's no guarantee that Anakin may not have heard of it. Anakin, after all, is well versed enough in Jedi history to know straight away that no one has ever been on the Council without being granted the rank of Master. To me as well, it seems that towards the end of telling the story, from when Palpatine says ironic, his manner of telling it seems to shift into recalling a perspective on events he directly had a part in, rather than recounting a myth. This could just be Palpatine trying to subconsciously tell Anakin that this is more than a story and there is an actual reality to it, or just him letting his guard down a little in sharing these galaxy-shaping events. But the thing to remember is that the tragedy was taken at its word before Disney jettisoned the expanded universe, and there's no reason why this shouldn't still be the case. So then, in my theory, Plagueis would of course actually have survived, having obviously been disfigured in the attack. One could imagine that Palpatine used Force Lightning to do the job, as it's the cause of his own disfigurement in Revenge of the Sith. Force Lightning may have this unique effect on dark side users. Snoke, because he barely survived and had to recover, reorganise, make new plans and hide from Palpatine, would have laid dormant all the subsequent time. As he says in The Force Awakens, he saw the rise and fall of Palpatine's empire. When Palpatine was seemingly destroyed in Return of the Jedi and the Empire was reduced to a remnant, this was the chance for Plagueis to take his place as the Supreme Leader of the First Order and also find a new Sith apprentice in Kylo Ren. This also means that when we see the rivalry and relationship between Kylo and Rey develop over the films, they're actually proxy pawns for Plagueis and Sidious, though neither is aware of it. This ties the sequels in strongly with the old films and makes them a reassertion of that oldest battle in the film canon. When I initially saw the first trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, I did have the idea of Rey travelling back in time to become Anakin's mother, Shmi Skywalker, based in large part just on the title of the film. With Luke dead, no one actually called Skywalker is left, and though Leia is Anakin's daughter, with Carrie Fisher deceased, it's hard to see how they could give her so pivotal a role that she's actually the title character. The other source of the idea was early rumours that suggested time travel would play a part in the film, as it's one thing Star Wars has yet to do, and that could easily tie in with Rey's vision in The Force Awakens when she first holds Anakin's lightsaber. I would see other people have the same idea regarding Rey being Shmi, but it would generally be dismissed as silly, with some justification. While there are some commonalities between them, it would be tough to swallow Rey being a younger version of the Shmi Skywalker that we've seen, and while it does have its fans and defenders, the Phantom Menace is generally not all that well regarded. And so, while JJ Abrams says he wants to tie the whole 9 episode saga together, it's hard to imagine references to episode 1 being that direct. As far as we currently know, JJ's plan to conclude all 9 films just seems to mean involving Palpatine as the ultimate villain, as the prequels are about his plan and rise to unlimited power, and the original trilogy is about his empire and ultimately his defeat with it. The previous theory about Palpatine's clones and Snoke being Plagueis of course ties things together to the past much more closely than just Palpatine's presence and some old Imperial Star Destroyers though, so consider this. Rey isn't Shmi, but Shmi's mother. Being conceived with Ben Solo might give this a slightly too incesty aspect, and we want to leave that firmly behind in The Empire Strikes Back, but whether it's by someone else, or whether Shmi's conceived by midichlorians as Anakin would later be. Shmi would of course have a lot of inherent Force potential. As with the original plan regarding her cloned mother though, it lies dormant in her, explaining why we don't see any suggestion of it in The Phantom Menace, unless we try to read more into her telling Qui-Gon that Anakin was meant to help them by racing the pod. And more tragically, we don't see any suggestion of her possessing any Force power either in Attack of the Clones. Palpatine though, with his particular study of midichlorians, along with his master Plagueis, comes to be able to sense them in a person, and so becomes aware of Shmi, and that's why he chooses her to become the mother of Anakin. After all, Plagueis could influence the midichlorians to create life, meaning Shmi must have some level of them to have conceived Anakin, and Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knew. This would of course make Rey the original progenitor of the Skywalkers, and so the rise of Skywalker could really mean their entry into history. Perhaps it's even that they didn't produce just one chosen one, but 3. Rey, the first Skywalker, as well as Anakin and Luke. Far from having no place in the story, as Kylo asserts in The Last Jedi, she would in fact be the beginning and the end of the story. Not just though because of her own Mary Sue perfection, her powers now after all being explained by her creation by Palpatine, but as the result of an evil scheme turned good. My choice for the Skywalker who finally triumphs though would be Anakin. If the sequels are to be recast as the Palpatine vs Plagueis battle anew, one former apprentice versus his former master, then the apprentice who seemingly defeated that other apprentice turned master and ended the Sith by turning to the light himself should again be the one to do so. How this works depends. It could be the case that instead of Plagueis straight out surviving his apparent murder by Sidious, he was instead strong enough in the Force to exist apparitionally and return to his body, in which case the final battle can play out in the Force realm. We've yet to see how Palpatine in fact can still be alive, so perhaps the answer lies there. In the last trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, we see what has been identified as Vader's helmet, also seen in The Force Awakens in Kylo's possession, on a plinth that is shattered by Rey and Kylo. Perhaps there is still some essence of Anakin contained within that which finishes off Palpatine, not as Kylo believes the essence of the Sith Lord Vader, but of the Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, who was really the last person to wear that helmet. As we see bits of destroyed Death Star, including Palpatine's throne room in the trailer, perhaps that and Vader's helmet as an artifact create the physical link for time travel elements, such that when the essence of Anakin defeats Palpatine, it's also taken back to when he first turned to the light to save Luke and defeat the Emperor, and so Darth Sidious is destroyed throughout all of time, never to return. As I say, this may give us the time travel elements that send Rey back to begin the whole Skywalker saga as well. These are sketchy thoughts and they would need refining and shaping to create a satisfying story, but there's enough here I think to provide everything needed to make all 9 films function together as a compelling whole. Much like the way I can see Disney wouldn't want so strong and clear a link between their new film and The Phantom Menace that they wouldn't directly make Rey into Shmi, I can also predict a particular objection some may have to my ideas. they feature a lot of the M-word, midichlorians. I personally have no problem fitting them into my impression of the Force, but I know they're a controversial addition to the Star Wars mythology. I don't think my ideas go beyond what we learn about them from the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, and if fans want Snoke to be Plagueis, as a great many do, then he comes with that storyline, or else what's the point of him? I know some people, particularly those who dislike the prequels, are likely against any acknowledgement of midichlorians, but I hope that to others my theories justify them and make sense. My personal suspicion is that George Lucas created them not just to give Qui-Gon Jinn an easy way to affirm Anakin's natural strength in the Force, but also so that there would exist a biological link to the Force that would give Palpatine a way to have created Anakin. Without going into detail, which many others have covered exhaustively, I have been on the critical side when it comes to Disney Star Wars, but I do hope The Rise of Skywalker will make up for it and give us the satisfying conclusion which Star Wars deserves. My personal hope when seeing the film is to be both satisfied but also surprised, but if some of this theory is in there, then I'll get a kick out of that too. What do you think of these ideas? Have you or anyone else had similar thoughts? I generally have steered clear of other theories since seeing the one by Star Wars Theory that I mentioned at the beginning, so I could riff on it without other influences. So I'd be interested to know if others have picked up on the same threads. I'd love to read any thoughts or questions or even criticisms that you might have in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed it, I really would appreciate a like or even a share to someone else who you think might be interested. This is my very first video, but I do have ideas for other Star Wars videos and maybe other subjects as well coming up in the near future. So if you are happy to hear from me again, I'd be really grateful if you subscribe. I will of course be reviewing The Rise of Skywalker when it comes out, so you'll be one of the first to see that. And subscriptions are really great for the algorithm as well, particularly at this early stage for me. This is Jonathan from Headhunters Media, and I hope I'll catch you again soon.